Can you think of some moments when you have seen something or heard something that just made you realize how quickly life is passing? Malachi's last birthday, he's 33. I stopped and was just thinking, like, he's older now than I was when we came to Christ Church. And I thought, wow, time's flying. Or John Didier's funeral. I was doing the math then and realized I was older then at his funeral than he was when Christ Church started. And I thought, wow, I don't think day by day that the years are passing that quickly, but they are. Occasionally I come across a picture that Lanny took years ago of what was pretty much the entire church body at the time. I think it was a Christmas picture that he took for like a Christmas card. And, we're all kind of spread out and old moldy. And you look at the faces, the kids that are grown now, all of that. And you think, wow, time sure has flown by. And it's not just that time has passed or that we've aged. There is that. But there's also, with that comes also at times a sense of the loss of wonder. Things that once gripped you just don't seem important anymore. Things that were critical at the moment aren't so critical now, or things that were good things that gripped you don't really hold the same wonder anymore. You can see that in so many areas of life. You can even see it with truths. There were truths, at one point that you're faced with, and you haven't really considered them that way before. You haven't seen them like that before, and they grip you, and you have to come to grips with them. And now those truths don't thrill you in the same way that they did at one time. Or the possibility of what God might do. And maybe years pass and God hasn't done that, and you don't wonder so much at what God might do. What once gripped us or even thrilled us becomes kind of ordinary. I love going to the beach or to the mountains and seeing a mountain peak or looking out over the ocean, and I think it must be nice to be able to do this all the time. But you have to wonder, the people that live here, do they walk out and look at the beach and think, wow, or do they just think, the person who lives at the foot of a mountain, that everybody else stops and kind of gawks at, do they come out in the morning and look up at it, or do they just think, it's scenery, it's landscape. It's always there. It's always been there. Have they lost their wonder at that completely? As years go by, also what seemed at one time certain may seem less certain. There's the temptation, especially I think when we're younger, to view life in a kind of a way that it's almost like a formula, And again, you can apply it to so many areas of life. But just think about work. Like, you work hard, you do the right things, and success is supposed to come. You can think that kind of way. But the reality is you can work hard and you can do the right things, and success can elude you. You can save and scrimp and put your money away and put it somewhere. You could have put it with Bernie, what's his name, Madoff? What am I trying to say? Not him. That him? Yeah. You could have put it someplace like that it's all gone. It was some scheme, and you thought you were doing the right thing. And, life goes by, and you think, wow, I thought it worked this way, and it doesn't exactly work that way. Ecclesiastes is a book that faces realities like that. Ecclesiastes is not an easy book. It has been called by some people the black sheep of the Bible. Part of its difficulty is that it says things that sound wrong. And even if they're not wrong, they sound uncomfortable. So for instance, in chapter 2 and verse 17, Solomon says, I hated life. You're not supposed to say that. Not out loud, are you? You sure don't write it down and pass it around, Or in chapter 3, verse 19, the fate of the sons of men and the fate of beasts is the same. Now what he means is we all die. We're all creatures and we all die. But you read it and you think, there's more to it than that, isn't there? Or chapter 7 and verse 16, do not be excessively righteous. Wait a minute, Solomon, really? We'll get to all that. But, I mean, you read it. And when he says these things, we can scratch our heads or try to dismiss it, but we have to reckon these are the sayings of a wise man, and not just a wise man, a man who's writing under the inspiration of God, but he's also someone who refuses to offer easy answers. The book has also been mishandled at times. Some have read it as just secular wisdom. So it's in the Bible, but what it represents is just the best of what the world has to offer, which seems to me completely denying inspiration. But there's a very popular study Bible that has gone around for years, and that's the view that was taken in that Bible. Others read Ecclesiastes as a foil to orthodox theology. So the rest of the Bible explains life like it's supposed to be, and Ecclesiastes, the value of Ecclesiastes is showing us what's wrong. And you look there to see what's wrong, and the rest of the Bible kind of tells you what's right, which again, just, it almost makes you wonder why read it. It doesn't seem to really help. But Ecclesiastes is inspired wisdom given by God. It is wisdom literature. It's the same God who gave us Job and the Psalms and the Proverbs. And it's the book that God has given his people for some of the hard edges of life. Well, why so much misunderstanding? I think a big reason that so many people have misunderstood the book of Ecclesiastes is because of how one word has been translated over and over again. It appears 38 times in the book, and most of our Bibles translate it vanity. So verse 2 of chapter 1, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And there's nothing wrong with the translation itself. I mean, it's a legitimate translation, but the connotation does have some problems. Words change the meaning over years, and the word that's translated vanity here has a range of meanings, not just one, and calling it vanity tends to narrow our focus down. But just as an example of how words can change over time, I looked up the word vanity in a modern dictionary, and the very first definition is a person who has an inflated pride in oneself or one's appearance, conceit. The same word in 1828 Webster's, that was, of 7 definitions, that was the last. So the most popular definition now was the last definition in 1828. Words change over time. The second meaning today in a dictionary, something that is vain, empty, or valueless. And that's closer, but Webster adds a little bit even to that, and this was the first usage in Webster's: emptiness, want of substance to satisfy desire, uncertainty. And he often gives examples in that edition, 1828, and the example he gives is Ecclesiastes 1:2. So emptiness, but the emptiness is the emptiness, the inability to satisfy desire. You expect this to fulfill a longing, and it doesn't. But even that is narrower than the Hebrew word might mean. But all the way back to, for years, the view has kind of been to call it vanity, and that has influenced how other translations have continued to translate the word. And I want to demonstrate by just reading a few to you. So this is the Holman Christian Standard Bible. Absolute futility, says the teacher. Absolute futility. Worthless. Empty. The New Century Version. I don't recommend all these translations, by the way, but just how they've been influenced, okay? The teacher says useless. Useless. Completely useless. Everything is useless. Well, the word that's translated here is the Hebrew word hevel. It's Hebel, but the B makes kind of a V sound. Hevel. Hevel. I think that's right. Emphasis on the first part. Hevel. And the range of meanings contains a number of things, including vanity or emptiness, but also you could say vapor, breath, transience, brevity, mystery, elusiveness. And if you look at what Solomon is saying, not just as, uselessness, but as more than that, the book starts to take on a little bit different shape. So think about this as a breath or a vapor. You go out on a cool morning and you breathe, and as you exhale, you can see a vapor for a moment. It's brief. You can see it. You can't grab it. In a few moments, it's gone. And that's part of what's contained here. By the way, the word is also sometimes translated idols. The idols are futile. They're empty. They're meaningless. It's not translated that way in the book of Ecclesiastes, and I don't think in the context it should be, but it is that way in the Old Testament. It's also a proper name. In Genesis, Abel is this word. God, I believe, directs Adam and Eve to name their second son Hevel, Abel, vapor, transient. Why? Because God knows. Adam and Eve understand that the curse has come, but they have not seen a human die at this point, and they will, but God knows. And it's not just Abel, it's Adam and Eve and all of us and the creation to some extent, all of the creation. So this word hevel means more than vanity. It's not just the idea that everything is empty or futile. The NIV, meaningless, utter meaningless, utterly meaningless. It's more than that. And if that's all it is, then Solomon is he's saying that this is all just, empty. It's kind of nihilistic. It's pointless. But if that's what it means, then is Ecclesiastes a book of wisdom or a book of despair? Sounds kind of despairing. It's all meaningless. What's the point? Or if that's what it means, then why are there those passages that say, God has given us these gifts, enjoy them? And if that's what it means, then why are there the passages like at the very end of the book where Solomon says, fear God? I mean, logically, it doesn't fit if everything is pointless. So, I say again, I believe it means more than that. And there seems to be a growing list of people who understand it that way. One, and by the way, as we walk through Ecclesiastes, we're going to look at 9 different instances of Hevel, if you will. So here's this point. You look at it, and it's elusive, it's brief, it's hard, and we'll deal with that. And that's how we're going to treat the book of Ecclesiastes. So not verse by verse. But if you want a verse by verse treatment, Brian Borgman, Don't Waste Your Breath, you can take a look at it because he does walk through it verse by verse. The last conference John preached was with Brian Borgman. If you don't know his name, he's a pastor in Nevada. Paul Washer's written the foreword for the book. Good guy. And he understands this book this way. Dr. Daniel Frederick, who's a professor of biblical studies at Belhaven University, has made a careful study of all 38 instances that the word is used in the book of Ecclesiastes. And he says that rather than vanity, the word that might best capture the idea is that of transience. It's temporary. It is fleeting. And that's a better idea than or understanding of how to think about the word rather than just meaningless. But the range includes both transience, the fact that life passes quickly, and we do see this in Scripture in so many places. I mean, think James chapter 4, verse 14. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. We're brief, we're transient. Or elusiveness, like the vapor that you can't quite grasp. Our lives sometimes feel that way. They don't fully submit to the formulas that people try to tell us, work. Brevity. Our life is a breath, and it's real and it's beautiful, but it's brief. Psalm 39:5 says, "Surely every man at his best is a mere breath." Or Psalm 144:4, "Man is like a mere breath. His days are like a passing shadow." There's also the mystery, the questions that you have that just are unanswerable. And you search for the answer. It bothers you. And maybe you find a thread over here and you think, maybe that's it. And you start pulling at that thread, but no, it doesn't really answer the question. One writer said that Hevel includes an enigmatic situation, so mysterious, an enigma, a theological conundrum, the pain of faith having to live with many questions unanswered. We have a longing to know. It's part of our makeup, but we can't. And this experience of life, as Solomon describes it, is one that is common to everybody. Maybe more to some people than others, but everybody. Not just, lost people feel this, but once you become a Christian, you don't feel this anymore. The Christian still wrestles with some of these things. The Christians, there are days we realize it's passing quickly, or we really haven't appreciated the gifts God has given, and it's passing quickly. Or there's this question, that's really hanging, it burdens me, and there doesn't seem to be an answer for it. And I'm going to have to just learn to live with the fact there's not an answer ready for me about this question, at least not now. So this idea of vanity or hevel is not code for life without God. It is the common human experience for all of us who live on this earth, for those who fear God and for those who do not. Of course, knowing God and fearing God provides help and some explanation for what's going on, even if we don't understand completely, in a way that the unbeliever doesn't have. But we both experience that kind of thing. And so these are observations that Solomon makes throughout the book, and he makes them as a man who does fear God. Before we move on, you might take just a moment and think about your last week. What in the last week is like vapor? What is it, is there anything that you're working hard at that just seems to slip through your fingers? And the harder you work at it, the more it seems to slip away. Or the question that, it's bothering you and you're carrying and it doesn't seem to have an answer. And, maybe it's been that way for some time and you still don't have an answer. And if there was a glimmer of light over here, you'd run over there and look at it, hoping that is the answer. And maybe it will be, maybe it won't. Ecclesiastes, Solomon says, I know, I understand. And he doesn't try to rush past the hard things to get to the good news. He spells out the difficulty. But then Solomon looks again and again to God and the fact that God is sovereign, and behind whatever is happening, whether you understand it or not, God is real and He's at work, and fear Him. It's not just Solomon that sees this, but the Bible explains this a number of times. But let me give you one place where I think it's very clear. In Romans chapter 8, if you'd turn there for just a moment, I want to read 3 verses from Romans 8. Romans 8, beginning in verse 19. For the anxious longing of the creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of Him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself also will be set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. So verse 20, Paul writes that the creation was subjected to futility. The Greek word that he uses there is the Greek word that the Septuagint uses for hevel. Septuagint is a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. So translated before the time of Jesus. Jesus at times quotes from the Septuagint. Paul uses the word that's used for the Greek translation in Ecclesiastes here to describe what God was doing. God subjected the creation to hevel, to futility. And so Paul's not inventing some new concept here or introducing some new idea, but really he's taking what Solomon has described and seeing it through the lens of Genesis chapter 3, the fall, but also seeing it through the lens of the hope that we have in Christ. God subjected the creation to hevel. And the point first being, God did it. It's not accidental. It's not, it is a result of the fall, but it's not a result of the fall that's outside of God's control and everything just kind of spun out of control when Adam and Eve fell. God subjected the creation to futility. He did it deliberately, sovereignly. That doesn't make everything necessarily easier in the moment, but it does give explanation. And it does tell us that this is controlled by the Father. It's not just chaos. God is at work, fulfilling His purposes. But then, verse 20 goes on and says that God subjected the creation to futility, not willingly, but because of Him who subjected it in hope. He subjected it to this futility in hope. The present fog that makes things unclear is purposeful fog. It's again not accidental. And the brevity is purposeful brevity. The fleeting nature of things is part of God's present design because of sin. The unanswered questions are questions that the answers are, God holds the answers to those. even if we don't. And he has purposes we can't yet see. And so this hope is not wishful thinking. Paul, writing Romans 8, the hope has a face, and the face is the resurrected Christ, from whom flows the renewal of all things and the freedom from the bondage to decay, the freedom of the creation from that bondage. And this futility is not the end of the story. It's just part of it. So for us, when there's confusion about why things went the way they did and didn't work like they were supposed to, we may not know, but God does. And your sense that familiar truths aren't gripping the way that they once were, God knows. Or the years of hard labor that don't always produce what you expected, God knows. And that's not a platitude. That is the sovereign hand of the same God who subjected creation to futility in hope. He knows what he's doing. And you are not outside of his hands just because you presently feel like you might be in a fog. Solomon, again, he presents these situations over and over again throughout the book. But then he runs again and again to God. And he never lets us escape the fear of the Lord. Look to him, fear him, trust him. Even his darkest observations are made by a man who believes in a sovereign God. And so his method is to observe life honestly and then interpret it through the lens of God's providence, his governance. And so I believe that the under the sun language of Ecclesiastes does not mean life without God, but it is life on this earth, the ordinary, everyday existence on this earth, experienced and lived under God's providence, in God's world, with God watching. Then there is, with that, a response that Solomon calls for again and again. It's kind of like a carpe diem kind of thing. Seize the day. He tells us again and again that life is like a vapor. It's brief and it's elusive, but it's held in God's sovereign hand. So what do you do with it? Well, you don't despair because it is held by God and God is governing it and he's good and purposeful. So don't just despair and don't, he tells us at times to seek pleasure, but he doesn't mean pleasure without God. He's not telling us just to pursue frantic pleasure seeking, because that also is vaporous. It's not an end in itself. The response that Solomon gives again and again throughout the book is receive today as a gift from God. Receive the good gifts he's given as gifts from him and enjoy them as gifts from him. Not without reference to him, but because you do fear him, you enjoy them more completely. So let me give you a quick example of that, and we'll talk more about this later, but just kind of a preview. In Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 24 through 26. After pointing out several areas that he says are vapor or futility or vanity, Solomon comes to verse 24, chapter 2, and he says, "There's nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and tell himself that his labor is good." He doesn't say that without reference to God. He says, "This also I have seen, that it is from the hand of God. For who can eat and who can have enjoyment without him? Even the capacity to enjoy the good gifts is a gift. For to a person who is good in his sight, he has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, while to the sinner he has given the task of gathering and collecting, so that he may give to one who is good in God's sight. This too is vanity and striving after wind." And that's not the conclusion of the book. That's chapter 2. But Solomon has already run an experiment. with wisdom and pleasure and wealth, and he's found them all to be vapor. He's found them all to be, transient, not completely satisfying. And his response is not give up. His response is eat, drink, find enjoyment in your labor, receive what's in your hand as a gift from God. Now, 3 things about this text, just briefly. One, he says in verse 24, there's nothing better. He uses superlatives. I believe what he's trying to say or to convey to us is that this isn't a consolation prize. This isn't second place prize. You're the first loser, so you get the second place prize. But rather, this is what God has given to you. It's a good gift. Nothing better than this. He's not saying God's not better or that heaven is not better or eternity is not better. But on this earth, this is a gift from the good God. Enjoy it. He tells us it is from the hand of God. The ordinary things like food and drink and labor are not ordinary at all. They're gifts from God. The meal, the day's work, having work to do. Sometimes that's a gift, isn't it? The moment of pleasure, these come from Him. Accept them as from Him. He also says, apart from Him, who can have enjoyment? Again, the capacity to enjoy is itself a gift. Surely there have been times maybe when you're sick, when food that you have enjoyed in the past is not enjoyable. And you eat because you need to eat for strength, and there's nothing about it that you enjoy. Have you ever experienced that? The gift is a gift, but the enjoyment of the gift is also a gift God gives to us. And then the brevity of it helps to sharpen the gift. James 4:14 again, you're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. That's not a funeral text. It's a text about how to live. The knowledge that you're a mist is not meant to produce despair. It's meant to sharpen our attention to what God has placed in your hand today. A meal enjoyed by someone who knows the meal is a gift from God and who knows that meals don't last forever. It's not a sad meal, but you might taste it more fully. You might enjoy it more, knowing there may not be another meal like this one. And that's the logic of Ecclesiastes. The vapor of life does not steal the gift away. It sharpens it. If you know you have limited time with someone, do you not try to appreciate them more and enjoy your time with them more than if you expect, they're always going to be here? Have you ever, different example, have you ever worked hard, toiled all day long, and you're going to have to repeat it tomorrow and the next day? And you can do that, and you can look at it as just, something to be endured. I've got to do it. I hate it, but I got to do it. Or you can look at it as God has given me the work, and God's given me the ability to work, and you can find joy in your work, even though you've got to do it again tomorrow. Well, Lord willing, every sermon that we will look at over the next few weeks will kind of follow this pattern. The hevel. I keep putting the emphasis on the wrong place. The thing that is troublesome, that makes you look and wonder. And then God and how He answers that, how He gives meaning to that. And then the call to receive the gift that God has given. Solomon does not save the gift passages for the end of the book. He gives them throughout the book, again and again. He shows us, how difficult life can be. He's honest about it. And then He shows us God, and then He says, open your hands to receive what God's given you today. So, Ecclesiastes, a book from God, given to people who've lived long enough to know that life is harder than formulas suggest. It's not necessarily a book for the naive, but it is for the honest. And if you've spent years doing all the right things and found that the outcomes do not always match the promises, Solomon talks about that. If you've carried questions that you can't quite get the answer to, Solomon understands that. He talks about that. He's been there. And if the joy that once came easily is something that you struggle to get your hands on now, he speaks about that too. It's familiar territory for him. He doesn't give us easy answers. He's not going to say, here's the easy out, here's the easy answer, but he will point us to consolation in God and joy in Him again and again. Two quick commands as we close, and the first one's in chapter 12 again. Verse 13. Chapter 12, verse 13, the conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep His commandments, because this applies to every person. The second is one that runs, again, throughout the book. Chapter 2, chapter 5, chapter 9, chapter 11, he tells us, eat, drink, find enjoyment in your toil. This is God's gift. The same God who commands your reverence, your worship, your fear, is the God who commands your joy. He's not looking to make you miserable. He has given us this brief life, and He gives us the gifts to be enjoyed in this brief life, to be received from His hand honestly and humbly and gratefully before His face. And that is heaven. Not everything is meaningless, but your life is a vapor. Receive it and enjoy it. It's from the hand of God.